Welcome to the Supported Living Property Podcast with your host, me, Lisa Brown, the place to learn about supported living property investing. Kerri, I'm delighted you've joined us today. Thank you for coming. I wanted to start, people maybe won't have heard of you, so I wondered if you could perhaps tell us a little bit about you and about your background and your story.
Okay, hi, thanks for having me. So my name's Kerri, obviously, and I got a bit of a long-winded story. To be fair, I came from an unfortunate background, shall we say, and I ended up in the foster care system at 11 and became exposed to homelessness by the time I was 13, in and out of hostels and temporary accommodation, supported accommodation, or different types of accommodation. And I became exposed to drugs as well. So I have high complex needs because I've got mental health issues. And yeah, that's pretty much a gist of who I am.
Kerri, thank you. Absolutely. And there's so much stuff, and you've got so much experience to share with us, haven't you, about your experience of different properties. Perhaps if we start right back, sort of from the beginning, about how you became, your experience of being in that foster care system from 11. That's obviously very young, isn't it?
Yeah, it was pretty difficult being in care, to be honest, because I felt abandoned and I felt like I was unloved and unwanted. Mainly because of the fact that I was different, with my mental health issues. We didn't realise it was ADHD at the time, but I had severe mental health issues, like other than that as well, like depression, anxiety. So being put into care, I just felt completely unwanted and abandoned. So I would run away from foster placements and end up going from one to the other, like every couple of weeks I'd be moving around. And then when I was 13, I just started running away to London because I used to run away up there to go to Sound Republic with MTV. I used to think if I hung out there long enough, I'd become famous because I'd meet someone famous or whatever, So I lived in a bit of a dream world. I think that's part of my mental health as well. So, I was running away from placements, and then I started sleeping on the streets from the age of 13. I just found it more comforting, like with the people around me. It was the community more than anything. It was the people that I was surrounded by were like-minded. They came from the same sort of background as me, abuse and like all different kinds of wrong sort of things. So, I just felt like I belonged on the streets. I don't know, because I was so easily discarded, that's where I belonged. And then when I was 16, because I was still in care, I was discharged from care and put into a supported accommodation, which was a big nightmare, to be fair. So sorry, was you going to say something?
Yeah, no. So I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand, is that feeling that you fit in. A lot of people who I've spoken to who've been street homeless have had that experience of feeling actually part of a community, and that's something that a lot of people don't understand. But that was obviously your experience, but you were very, very young to be, obviously there's lots and lots of failures in the system that must have led for you to be in that position. And sadly, that you're not the only person with those experiences, are you? And that's so tragic about it, is that this was a while ago, wasn't it? You're older now, but unfortunately these experiences are still happening for young people today, aren't they?
We're going back into the 90s, and it's when I was 13. It's a long time ago now, 20 years ago, and you can still see the same things happening, like the same young people falling through the gaps and into hidden homeless and stuff like that. And I think, it's that whole trial and error thing. It's like, yeah, fair enough, trial something and then come up with whether or not it's positive or error, but how long must you trial and error something before you realize actually this is not working? So there's obviously stuff that needs to change within that system.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that needs addressing, isn't it? So you were saying at 16 you were placed in a supported accommodation. What was that like? Can you describe what that property was like and how it was?
So The first one I was placed in was more like a supported lodging. So it was a lady who rented out a room in her house, and she was going to help me if I needed any help to be able to do budgeting and stuff like that. To be honest, I was 16. I took that as an opportunity as, oh, well, I've got a roof over my head. I can just do what I want now. You know, it's like nobody's in charge of me. I had no boundaries. And that environment and that network I was coming from, combined with my mental health issues, was just like catastrophe, you know. So I ended up being kicked out of the supported lodgings after literally about 10 days, and then placed into a supported accommodation, which was like no support, no adult on site at all, and it was just a case of running back and forth to the social services when we needed help. So again, that didn't work. I just decided that it was better on the streets. And then by the time I was 17, I was sleeping rough in Charing Cross subway and hooked on crack. So it was a couple of, I think I was taking crack for it wasn't that long. When I first started taking crack, I decided after about 6 weeks I'm going to give this up. So I moved back to Newcastle, but because I was still under a full care plan, social services were obligated to support me. So I went to the social services in Newcastle because that's where I was born, and represented myself there. And they said, oh, well, I had to go and represent as homeless to the homeless department. So I went to the council, 17, nobody came with me or anything. They just said, off you go. So I went there, represented myself as homeless. They put me into a temporary accommodation, which was again a house. It had about 5 rooms in it, and all these girls that were in there, they were just like 16 to 18 in the same predicament. There was a night warden that would stay on the premises every night just to make sure everything was all right. But again, it was no, you know, left to do everything on your own, you know,
no kind of specialist support in these properties that you were in at all.
No, and the fact that I had high complex needs, like, it's quite concerning because they kept leaving me to my own devices. And then shortly before my 18th birthday, I was given a 2-bedroom flat by the local authority in Newcastle, and again, they put me in. Said, there you go. Because I was entitled to £1,000 leave and care grant, I was given £300 of that because of my chaoticness. They wouldn't let me have all of it. So they gave me £300, which I went out, bought some stuff, and they come with me, bought some paint and stuff, and then they said, there you go, left me to it. So 17, I thought, right, I'm going to paint this house. I've got no clue what I'm doing. And I decided to paint myself into the living room. So instead of painting from the corner out to the door, I painted the wood floor in gloss paint from the door to the corner of the room. So I laugh now because it was hilarious, you know, but you know, and I had to like tiptoe across the living room. So then it's gloss paint, it's just got gloss footprints across. For the whole time I was in that tenancy, I was letting the wrong people in, associating with the wrong people because I was looking for love in all the wrong places. And then I lost that tenancy after about 5-6 months, and then I ended up back on the streets in London. And then I was sectioned in Gates. No, sorry, I didn't go back to London. I got sectioned after that flat, after a short bout back in London. Sorry, there's so much that's happened. It's trying to remember which happened when. So yeah, I got sectioned not long after that, and then I was given another flat, which again, same thing happened. Left to my own devices, lost the tenancy quickly, and then ended up street homeless because I was intentionally homeless now because I'd lost these tenancies through stupidity of my own sort of thing.
No,
and they
really lack of support, you know, the system down, not, you know,
but that was what they said to me, like, oh, you keep giving up, you keep losing these tenancies. Well, hang on, you're not giving me the support to maintain these tenancies, you know. So I was written off, kept being written off. And then when I was 19, I fell pregnant, and the person I'd fell pregnant to, he was a heroin addict, which I didn't know at the time. It wasn't until a few weeks into the relationship I found out that he was a heroin addict. At that point, I'd actually fallen pregnant. It was very quick. And then social services took my child because the chaotic background and the losing of tenancies and stuff like that. they took my child, which was then rock bottom for me. And then I became proper street homeless and addicted to £100 worth of drugs a day and not caring at all. For 5 years that went on. And then like the social services put my son up for adoption as well. And then after that, about 5 years into that, I decided, right, I need to get off of this now. And then I got into a homeless hostel. But the people that I was working with, they did everything they could to support me in the areas that I needed. So all that support that I'd lacked in the previous years, I'd finally found people that were actually going to support me in those areas. And they did. And 12 years later, I'm clean. I've had 3 tenancies in the last 12 years. But for me, that's pretty good, I think, because of the fact I moved around every other couple of weeks when I was younger. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, the fact that I've managed to maintain 2 3-year tenancies and a 4-year tenancy, but there's no plans in the future for me to move from this house anyway now. So I'm finally settled. I'm finally in a place where I feel like I can call it home rather than just a place to stay. Do you know what I mean? So, but my landlady, she's absolutely awesome. She supports me. She knows I've got complex needs, but she as long as we talk to each other, it's all good, you know. So yeah, I think that really helps, you know, the fact that she's really supportive.
That's such an amazing story, Kerri. I mean, an amazing story of survival for you, and for you to have managed to pull yourself up to this point where you are now, and turn things around. You talked about the support that you got in, you know, when you went into that homeless, was it a hostel you went into to start?
Yes, so it was Look Ahead Victoria. It's closed down now, to be honest. Like most hostels in the West End, it's ridiculous. There used to be like 10 hostels open back when I was on the streets 12 years ago, and now I don't even think there's 5 or 6, you know. And yeah, but they tailored the support for me individually. So they gave me like 2 key workers, which were specialised in different areas, and then I also had a drug worker with the Hungerford Project. But the 3 of them, they just clicked, and they were like able to work as a team to be able to support me rather than individual key workers. And I think that's really important, you know, because the last thing, when you're in that predicament, when you're in like trying to get into recovery and stuff, the repetitive cycle is just too much hard work sometimes, and you just think, I can't be dealing with this. I need to get out. I'm sick of going through the same thing over and over and over again with different people, you know. And so I think it's important that you have a team, that work as a team, you know, that talk to each other, that communicate with each other, you know. So if your substance abuse is going to cause a problem for your tenancy, then your substance abuse worker needs to talk to your tenancy officer. Do you know what I mean? So it's that whole
joined up thinking, isn't it? It's like seeing you as a person and how all of the different bits of you fit together, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so they managed to do that. They managed to communicate with each other to support you, and brilliant. And so
Yeah.
from that hostel, how long were you in the hostel for, would you say?
I was there for a while, but there was an incident which got me kicked out at one point, but then they let me back in because I got no further action from the police. So, but the second time I was in there from the October until the July because I fell pregnant, so I had to leave. Because it wasn't safe for me to live there, because there was a unit for substance abuse. There was all different cases of complexity. So because I was pregnant, not to mention with twins, it was a case of like damage limitation, so they had to get me out in the end. But I moved out in the July, and I think it was closed about 6 weeks later.
Right, okay.
So, and that's like 250 beds sitting there empty, you know. It's ridiculous.
So where did you go to there? Where were you moved
So
from?
then I was put into a hotel for 6 weeks while I was just waiting for a tenancy to come up. And then I got my tenancy, which was my first proper tenancy, that I kept, which was in Pimlico. It was a 2-bedroom flat and it was on the 7th floor. The fact that I had newly born twins, it was quite difficult. So, and then my partner and I split up, and it was just a bit painful and all that. So then his mum said to me, why don't you move here to Wallasey? And she'll support me, because I was going backwards when I was in that flat, because everything I'd worked towards to keep the twins and get clean and everything started to crumble when my ex-partner broke my heart, should we say. So I ended up going backwards, started drinking a little bit, well, quite a bit, smoking a lot of cannabis. I was just off my face all the time, and I've got toddler twins, you know, and it's like, that's not a good look. And social services were back involved. So Sandy, she was like, no, come move to Wallasey, and I'll support you with the kids. So I did, and I've been here 8 years in March. It's the longest I've ever stayed in any one place. She is an amazing support network to me as well. You know, it's like she talks to my landlady as well. So, you know, they're all part of a team. Again, it all comes down to teamwork. You know, if you've got a support network in place, you all need to be able to communicate to each other and get that message across to them, to save the person who needs the help any added pain, shall we say, because the revealing of what's going on all the time is quite, it's hurtful. So I think that's really important as well, the people work in a team. I keep going tangent, I'm really sorry.
Oh, not at all, Kerri. Absolutely. I think it's amazing that you're where you are now. I think, you know, it's just such an amazing story to share with everybody, to understand the impact of good support and poor support, and how that directly affects you and the experiences you've had. What's the future look like for you, Kerri? Where do you see yourself going now? I know you've written a book, haven't you?
I have written a book.
Tell us a little bit about your book.
So the book out at the moment is on Amazon. It is a brief, shall we say. I think it's a very brief account. It's basically the story of what I went through as a child, being neglected, abandoned, and then going into care, how that made me feel, and then how I ended up sleeping rough. So basically just sharing a brief of my story. I'm looking to get published properly in the new year. But I guess moving forward, I just want to keep doing what I've been doing, like writing blogs and just breaking down misconceptions of homelessness, and, you know, removing the stigmas. And because, you know, when to the eye, it's like when you just look at a homeless person, you don't think what's actually going on in their actual world. You know, it's and each person is different, you know, and it really frustrates me when I hear people say, oh, they choose to sleep on the streets. And I want to just break down all that nonsense, because that's all it is, nonsense, you know. Because if you actually sat down and spoke to a homeless person that was begging on the street and asked them to tell you a bit about themselves, you know, you'd be surprised at the intellect or the intelligence that comes out of their mouth. You know, it's just like, whoa, because they haven't been given a chance, you know. And it's like, that's it, it's like, you've got to be giving people a chance. So that's what I want to be doing in the new year. I just want to be very mouthy and just get my point across and be heard, basically.
And you've got so much to say, and for people to hear it is so important that people hear and understand this message, Kerri. Thank you ever so much for sharing it. It's been really a privilege to talk to you today.
No, thanks for having me.